Emma's alarm buzzed gently, pulling her from the vestiges of a dream she couldn't quite recall. She reached out, silencing it with a practiced tap before laying back for a moment, letting the silence of her small apartment envelop her. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting soft, golden stripes across the hardwood floor. This space, humble yet cozy, was her sanctuary, a place she'd fought hard to call her own. Turning onto her side, Emma reached for her prosthetic leg resting beside the bed. Her movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic after years of practice. The faint clink of metal joints locking into place was a comforting sound, a testament to her resilience. 5 years ago, a car accident had claimed both her legs, leaving her to rebuild her life from the ground up. The memories of that day were hazy, a blur of screeching tires, shattered glass, and the eerie silence that followed. Yet, every morning as she attached her prosthetics, she reminded herself she had survived. And survival was no small victory. Standing in front of her mirror, Emma took in her reflection. Her prosthetics, sleek and functional, were a reminder of the battles she'd won. But her gaze moved past them to her face, the determined set of her jaw, the spark in her hazel eyes. She was more than her injuries. She was living, thriving, even. Emma dressed quickly, opting for a pair of dark jeans and a soft sweater. Over time, she'd mastered dressing efficiently, choosing outfits that balanced comfort and confidence. Fashion had once been an afterthought, but these days she relished the small joy of putting herself together. Her reflection smiled back at her as she grabbed her keys, bag, and a slice of toast before heading out the door. Her car, a modified sedan equipped with hand controls, waited in the driveway. Getting back behind the wheel after the accident had been terrifying at first, but driving had since become one of her greatest sources of independence. She slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the controls, and started the engine. As she navigated the quiet morning streets, the rhythm of the car brought a sense of calm. Today, she wasn't dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. Today, she was heading to meet friends at their favorite coffee shop. The cafe was a warm, inviting space with the scent of fresh pastries and espresso hanging in the air. Emma spotted her friends immediately, their laughter carrying across the room. "Emma," called Clara, waving enthusiastically. "Over here." Emma rolled herself to the table, grinning. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied, settling into her chair. The next few hours passed in a blur of conversation and laughter, the kind of effortless camaraderie that made everything else fade away. These were her people, her chosen family. They'd been there through the hardest times, reminding her she wasn't alone. By the time Emma left the cafe, the sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the parking lot. She felt lighter, buoyed by the warmth of her friends' company. Sliding back into her car, she began the drive home, her mind still replaying snippets of their conversations. That's when she noticed the police car. The flashing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. Emma's stomach tightened as she pulled to the side of the road, her palms suddenly clammy. She hadn't been speeding. She hadn't done anything wrong. So why was she being stopped? A uniformed officer emerged from the patrol car, his gait deliberate as he approached her window. Emma rolled it down, her heart thudding in her chest. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said, his voice curt. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." Emma blinked, her mind racing. I can't step out. Officer, I'm disabled. I have prosthetics and—" "Step out of the vehicle," he interrupted, leaning closer to scrutinize her. His tone was sharper now, his eyes hard. "I'm not asking again." Emma's breath hitched. This wasn't right. She tried to explain again, her voice trembling. "I physically can't stand. If you'll let me, I can show you my ID and registration." But the officer wasn't listening. "You're not above the law." "Ma'am," he said coldly, "now step out, or I'll assist you myself." Panic flared in Emma's chest. "Please," she tried again, her voice cracking. "I'm not resisting. I just can't get out of the car." Without warning, the officer yanked the door open and reached for her arm. His grip was rough, his movements forceful as he tried to pull her from the seat. Emma cried out, her prosthetics twisting painfully as he dragged her forward. "Stop! You're hurting me!" she shouted, her voice echoing in the stillness of the street. But the officer's face was stony. "You're coming out of this car," he growled, ignoring her protests. Emma's prosthetic leg slipped loose, clattering to the pavement. The crowd that had begun to gather gasped, murmurs of disbelief rippling through the onlookers. Phones appeared, cameras capturing every agonizing second. "What are you doing?" someone in the crowd yelled. "She can't walk. Let her go." The officer didn't stop. He dragged Emma further, her body limp with shock and pain. Tears stung her eyes as humiliation burned in her chest. "Let me go," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer finally released her, shoving her roughly against the side of his patrol car. "You think you're special," he spat. "Just because you're disabled doesn't mean you can break the rules." Emma was shaking now, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, voices raised in outrage. One woman stepped forward, phone in hand. "I've got everything on video," she said firmly. "You can't treat her like this." At that moment, another patrol car pulled up. A younger officer stepped out, his face a mixture of confusion and concern as he took in the scene. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice steady but sharp. The first officer turned to him, bristling. "She's uncooperative. Needs to be arrested." The younger officer frowned, his gaze moving to Emma, who was trembling against the car. "Uncooperative?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "She's clearly disabled. You can't treat her like this." The first officer's face darkened, but the younger one didn't back down. "Step back," he said firmly. "We're done here." The tension hung thick in the air before the older officer finally relented, storming back to his car with a muttered curse. The younger officer turned to Emma, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Emma nodded, though tears still streamed down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stepping in." The officer's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry this happened," he said. "It shouldn't have." Over the next few weeks, the video of Emma's encounter spread across social media, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. Emma found herself thrust into the spotlight, her story becoming a rallying cry for change. She partnered with a civil rights lawyer, Claire Evans, to pursue legal action against the officer and the department. It wasn't just about justice for herself. It was about making sure no one else endured what she had. The court hearing was grueling, with the defense painting Emma as combative and the officer as simply doing his job. But with Claire's expertise and the damning video evidence, Emma's truth prevailed. The officer was held accountable, and new policies were introduced to address the treatment of disabled individuals during police encounters. Through it all, Emma found strength she hadn't known she possessed. She started a support group for others who had faced discrimination, turning her pain into purpose. And though the road ahead was still long, she walked it with her head held high, knowing she wasn't alone. Because of Emma, the world was beginning to change.